Welcome to the Pelle, Neroth, Taylor, and Basil Valentine podcast with our guest Martin Sieff. Oops, sorry. But Basil and I, exactly. No, Basil and I are old friends, and we hosted a show together. But he's now today's a guest, and it's of course Martin's and my show. We talk about geopolitics from both sides of the Atlantic with our inside perspectives. And there's scarcely anyone more insidery than Basil Valentine, who's a UK-based broadcaster, journalist, writer, commentator. And at the moment, he's found a berth at UK Column, which is my favorite UK-based alt media site. I mean, our views are pretty congruent, and they don't. I think some of the British alt media websites, they're kind of just into Muslim bashing and immigrant bashing, and they're very sort of mainstream on issues like Russia and Ukraine. But UK Column really goes to the bottom of everything, so I really recommend them. And you probably, if you're watching this, you're much more likely to watch UK Column because they've got quite a lot of subscribers, and so you host a show there. So Basil, you're in the UK, I'm in the UK, Marty's ex-UK. We're going to talk a little bit about UK politics because, of course, by the way, condolences to England for the. I actually made some money on by betting on Argentina. Betting on England in the World Cup.
You too, same here.
Exactly. Betting against England in the World Cup is probably a winner. I knew that they were going to choke. Yeah. We'll have a special show on that. I mean, Basil, you're a betting man, and you can talk about that as you wish. But we'd start off. We'll go where you go. There's a new. Is it the fifth or the sixth or seventh prime minister since Brexit? We've got a new one. There's no vote on it. It's by acclamation. Who is Burnham? What's he like? What's his cabinet going to be like? And where are we going in England and Britain?
Well, first of all, just to wrap up about the World Cup, lots of videos are doing the rounds saying that the Argentinians once again were the beneficiaries of some extremely dubious refereeing decisions, with England players repeatedly fouled and not getting the fouls that they should have got, but really the mistake was Thomas Tuchel, the German manager. I mean, it's bizarre that England are happy to go into major tournaments with foreign managers, because, I mean, I can't see how a foreign manager can rouse a team, with quoting passages from Henry V or something before they take the field. If you're German, so, and he also left two of England's very best players, Phil Foden and Cole Palmer, at home back in England. Now, if they'd come on the pitch when England were 1-0 up and tried to make it 2-0, it could have all been very different. But as it was, England retreated into their shells and blew away like an empty crisp packet, all too predictable. And of course, in typical FA fashion, they extended the manager's contract before the tournament. They love to reward failure at the FA, and indeed one could say that's carries over into British politics, the reward of failure, certainly the love of failure. As you said, Pelle, we've had half a dozen prime ministers in the last few years, all of them semi or completely incompetent. And now, by acclamation, as you say, an extraordinary state of affairs. We've never had anything quite like this before, where somebody who wasn't a member of Parliament at the last general election has been parachuted in. And the reason why he is able to assume the leadership of the Labour Party and as the governing party, thereby the office of Prime Minister, the keys to number 10, is because he won a by-election with a thumping majority. Now, if Burnham hadn't won the Makerfield by-election with such a large majority, if he'd only just scraped home from reform, then people would have been saying, well, this bloke isn't necessarily going to improve Labour's electoral prospects going forward. Perhaps we need a leadership contest. Starmer was defiant a few weeks ago, saying that he was definitely going to stand in any upcoming leadership contest. And of course, other names like Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner had also been mooted. But because Burnham won this Makerfield by-election so decisively, it then became clear that he was the only person that could save Labour apparently from a reform government. And of course, Labour MPs think and vote with their pocketbooks and their egos. We've got a huge Labour majority. They have 2/3 roughly of the seats in the House of Commons when they got only about 1/3 of the votes at the last general election. And if you include those that didn't vote and people who are not on the electoral register at all, you end up with a government with a majority that can do what it likes, that's actually supported, or rather was supported at the time of the election, only by 1 in every 6 or 7 adults. Now, to me, that speaks of a real crisis of democracy, particularly when we have a system in Britain whereby a majority in the House of Commons means you can do what you like. You can basically push through any legislation. It's not like the US where you've got Congress and Senate both elected, checks and balances, and then, of course, the executive of the presidency. The House of Lords used to provide some sort of check on the excesses of the Commons, more so when it consisted largely of hereditary peers.
Yes.
People seem to forget that the whole point of hereditary peers was that they were supposed to be apolitical. They did tend to be naturally conservative with a small c, but they were supposed to think in the best long-term interests of the country, providing that sort of dose of wisdom that's so lacking from the House of Commons. The current Commons is made up of dozens and dozens of Labour Party apparatchiks, most of them wet behind the ears, half our age, who were parachuted into. Pardon?
A third of my age, Basil.
2/3, surely.
Yes. Well, no. I can't even do my math anymore, Pelle. Exactly.
Anyway, sorry. Yeah, Karen.
And these adolescents can do what they like. Topped off until this week by a particularly venal, mendacious individual in the shape of Keir Starmer, who lied about just about everything to become leader of the Labour Party, then produced a Labour Party manifesto, which was again a pack of lies, and he even lied his way out of the door this week. A really awful character, spectacularly unpopular.
What was his lie this week then?
Well, I mean, once again, he repeated this nonsense about the Labour Party being a hotbed of anti-Semitism before he took over, when, in fact, Starmer, has expelled more Jewish members of the Labour Party than any previous leader. So if you've got a Gentile expelling Jews from the Labour Party, then surely they are the anti-Semite. The whole anti-Semitism farrago in the Labour Party was, of course, cooked up because Jeremy Corbyn dared to speak up occasionally on behalf of the Palestinian people. So he was politically assassinated. He didn't fight back. I mean, that's another story. There's a very good book by Asa Winstanley about it. Various others come out, films, what have you, because there were no more instances of anti-Semitism under Jeremy Corbyn's watch than there had been ever before. But because he didn't fight back, because he admitted there was a problem, they crucified him with it, if you'll pardon the expression.
Because there was that guy, Morgan McSweeney and the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. And then they we've got a friend, and I think he was with us back in TNT days, the guy who runs the Disinformation Chronicle, Paul Thacker, he got millions of likes for this tweet because Musk retweeted it. But he investigated how the CCDH was going to take over the Democrat Party, or work with them very closely. And one of their agenda items was to kill Twitter. So if Biden had won the election in 2020 or Kamala Harris in 2024, the British Labour Party would have been all over US politics. And that's one of the good things about the Republicans winning, as they highlighted this. But I mean, basically, the anti-Semitism was the vehicle by which you're going to control free speech in the entire Western world, and it was led from London. And that was a Labour Party idea. Is that something you're familiar with, Basil?
Very. Going all the way back to the first introduction of the concept of hate speech and then hate speech laws. You know, when we were growing up, there was no such thing as hate speech. People could say hateful things, but you were allowed to in a liberal society. It might not be very pleasant, but that's the price we were all very happy to pay for the golden prize, so to speak, for our right to freedom of speech.
Exactly.
And of course, you know, conspiracy to murder, that sort of thing was, of course, outlawed. But suddenly, governments decided it was start necessary to legislate around human emotions, presuming somebody's motive when saying or writing something. Somebody may say something very strong language, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's any hate involved. That's an entirely subjective interpretation of what's being said, you know.
Right.
So and now, of course, it's gone on. I mean, the abiding theme of the outgoing Starmer regime is its authoritarian nature.
Right. Yes.
You know, I've long since been saying that the danger of fascism in the West comes not from the far right, or for that matter, as others now claim, the sort of Islamo-leftist alliance on the far left. It comes from the fake center. It comes from the so-called third way, you know, Ursula von der Leyen, Tony Blair, a cartel, who permit only a very narrow opinion corridor about world events, and increasingly are trying to legislate to make sure that that opinion corridor is enforced by law. The latest British government idea is to force Twitter, X as it now is, which is still enormously influential and really has become the sort of talking shop, the town square, the Roman Senate, as it were, of the 21st century, but to force it and YouTube, which, remember, garners more views, YouTube, than Netflix, Disney, and all the other streaming services combined. The numbers on YouTube are off the charts. You may think of it still sort of perhaps in terms of where it was 5 years ago or something, but no, it completely dominates the online video scene, television watching scene. They're now launching YouTube television. So the government want to force YouTube to prioritize news from what it calls reliable sources. That's the term in the Green Paper, reliable sources, by which, of course, they mean the BBC and all the establishment media. So that that's what you get in your feed. Now, you'll still be able to find programs like this if you search for them. But recently, YouTube changed its algorithm to serve up to viewers more of the same subject matter that they've been watching, but very often from very small channels, from unheralded content creators. So if you were fond of watching things about, particularly, say, the war in Ukraine, and you watched all the corporate coverage, and then you perhaps went to some interesting other sites like Breaking Points or Glenn Greenwald or people like that, then you'd get served up more of that, including from some very small channels. Well, the government don't like that. They don't like the fact that you're able to navigate your way round of free flow of information and make your own mind up. They want to ram their approved propaganda down your throat. So it's just another way. I mean, we've had so many restrictions on protest, arrests of people speaking out too vociferously against the genocide in Gaza. I mean, it's been a full court press by the Starmer regime, who I would say the most authoritarian government in British history. I mean, we just had passed last week at breakneck speed something called the National Security State Threats Bill, now an act.
Tell us about that.
Well, the following day, or within days, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps was then prescribed as an organization, meaning that if you were, as a journalist, to quote the IRGC, or indeed possibly IRGC
Yes.
related sources, you could be liable for 14 years in prison.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're sort of colluding with terrorists or something.
Was it the same
So
for RT Russia Today as well?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and Germany, of course, passed that law, didn't they? Say you're going to go to prison for sharing links, just sharing links from RT. You go to jail for 5 years or something. So there's I mean, we use these terms, fascist, 20th century term, really. I think they're somewhat outdated. I think the whole left-right paradigm is increasingly irrelevant, but you can call it, hardcore authoritarianism that's coming out of Brussels, Berlin, London, everywhere in Europe except perhaps Madrid, although they, on Trump's orders, arrested a very wealthy left-wing activist.
Right.
I don't know if you saw that this
No,
week.
I didn't. No.
I think his name's something Gilbert. He's heir to one of the heirs to a considerable fortune, and he's donated money to all sorts of activist causes, millions and millions of pounds. Well, Trump has ordered his arrest. He was arrested in Ibiza, and he's now awaiting extradition to the United States, where they plan on locking him up and throwing away the key, because they can claim that some of these causes he supported are in some way related to bodies deemed illegal by the US.
Well,
so,
I mean, what's his name? Rubio is kind of the proconsul of Venezuela, apparently, and they're going to invade Cuba. So they've got their eye on the Hispanic world, like few previous administrations. And I can see Spain being at odds there with Rubio's plans. Before I bring you in, Martin, I just want to say, just tell us a little bit about these cabinet picks then. I mean, or likely cabinet picks. Isn't Blair's name all over them? I mean, imagine you got a European audience who thought that Blair was off the scene 20 years ago when he departed after the Iraq War fiasco in 2007. But he's back. We've had his Tony Blair Institute, which runs things very much from behind the scenes. You've got Streeting, who is his disciple. He's going to get a good cabinet position. You've got people who haven't been in office for many years, like David Miliband. You've got Ed Miliband, who was the former Labour leader. Tell us a little bit about where you think they might be going and who Burnham might be bringing in. His cabinet starts on Monday.
Well, I saw Shabana Mahmood being mooted as a possible Chancellor of the Exchequer, but the comment was that would be a total gift to the opposition parties. Ed Miliband's name had also been mooted as Chancellor, but the fear is that because he's considered rather left-wing, that would send the markets running for cover. His brother David has been out of frontline politics for over a decade, since he lost the leadership of the Labour Party election to brother Ed. He went off to run international rescue from Tracy Island or wherever it is. He's being talked about as possible foreign secretary, being parachuted into the House of Lords. So there'd been no formal announcements yet. I think Streeting might well move to the Home Office. To be honest, it's Burnham's cabinet is likely to have a sort of vaguely more left-wing tinge to it. When you go to these paint shops and you see the gradations of color. Well, I mean, in fact, you can see them these days on Adobe Paintbrush or in an online application. This spectrum of colors, and we're going to go sort of 1 degree towards the sort of further red,
Right.
in terms of the overall composition. But as you rightly pointed out, Burnham is surrounded by Labour Together staffers. Labour Together is the organisation that was effectively set up as sort of Continuity Blair, designed to bring down Corbyn in the first instance and then install Starmer. McSweeney was at the heart of it, as of course was Peter Mandelson, who may yet still be pulling strings from behind the scenes. We don't know. along with the vampire Blair himself. So there's nothing sort of new broom sweeps clean about Burnham. Even Josh Simons, the bloke who gave up his seat in Makerfield so that Burnham could stand, he's deep in Labour Together. He's the guy who was trying to, well, he employed spooks to go around investigating journalists who'd been digging up the dirt on Starmer, or rather exposing the corruption at the heart of the Labour Party. So, James Purnell is the chief of staff. That's one appointment we do know. Former chair of Labour Friends of Israel. So, for all that Burnham gave an interview to Gary Lineker, the former England striker, who now runs this hugely successful The Rest Is podcast series. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I mean, valued at millions, Lineker has sort of reinvented himself as a notable pundit, shall we say,
a lefty sort of.
Well, the fact that Burnham gave one of his first major interviews to Gary Lineker, who was dared to speak up on behalf of the Palestinian people, something that cost him his job fronting Match of the Day on the BBC, that's got all the heckles, that's got them all jumping up and down. Why is Burnham giving an interview to this notorious? Anybody who speaks up on behalf of the Palestinians is automatically a notorious anti-Semite. So we're going to see some nuance.
So there might be slightly less pro-Israel, is what you're saying, if on the basis.
Well, he said. I mean, one of the first things he said was that Labour had got it wrong on Gaza at the start of the genocide. He still didn't call it a genocide, and that comment was then endorsed by the Foreign Secretary in committee, Yvette Cooper. But no policy changes. Israel just this week has announced another $434 million for 35 new settlements in the West Bank. And yet these people still talk about a two-state solution. Well, where is the Palestinian state, and how exactly is it going to be brought about if you don't do anything at all to stop Israel building these endless settlements? They continue to be in this defense partnership agreement with the UK. I mean, absolutely unbelievable stuff. But of course, if Burnham recognizes it's a genocide, then rather than enjoying a pleasant retirement or some other well-paid sinecure, Keir Starmer should be heading to The Hague. So that's why it's very difficult for Burnham to use the word genocide, quite apart from the fact that, of course, you'd have all the genocide deniers jumping up and down.
Well, interesting. Marty, have you got any thoughts from your side of the Atlantic? I mean, where does America see this going, and how will Burnham treat Trump?
I don't think it's a revealing answer, because America doesn't care, because Britain is a pimple. And in fact, we should do a separate show sometime, hopefully with you, Basil, because I think it's right up your street too, on the myth of the special relationship. Because even during World War II, I've been looking into this in more detail more recently, and actually there's a wonderful Anglo-American historian, a British historian who came to America, the great Nigel Hamilton, who did a masterful 3-volume biography a few years ago of President Roosevelt. And the theme of the biography was that the greatest pain in President Roosevelt's side through the war, his greatest worry, was Winston Churchill, trying to throw away hundreds of thousands of British and American lives, and Polish lives, and Canadian lives, and for that matter, Palestinian Jewish lives, crawling up Italy and trying to prevent D-Day from ever happening. But this was, by 1943, General Marshall and President Roosevelt and Harry Hopkins all saw this. So you have the great British theme in Churchill's memoirs, and it has application today. Oh, America can't make a move without us, and even when they do, they regret it afterwards. The City of London, the old conservatives in Britain are wise, and as Churchill said, the little donkey, which is a donkey, is a stinking animal and a very ugly one. So it's very revealing to me that Churchill, identified with a donkey, is the only one who knows the way ahead. outright lie. At Tehran, Stalin and Roosevelt had to gang up on Churchill in order to prevent Churchill from losing the war by charging into the Balkans. And it was Stalin and FDR together, of all things, who insisted on D-Day happening. But this is recooked, as you know, Basil, in British historiography for the past 80 years as American stupidity and Churchill being wise. Was not so. But what you're saying here, first of all, is an education to me, but it's also a nightmare to me. I feel when I listen to you that you're writing the plot for a more frightening Hammer horror movie than I have ever seen, because all the old monsters are back. Instead of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee rising from the grave, we have Peter Mandelson rising from the grave. And as you and Pelle said, the vampire Tony Blair, who never went away, you know, and they never go away and nothing changes. But I have one thought to add to this, if I may, and then I have a question for you. But the thought is this. The situation you describe, the new fascism, we have it in America too. Exactly the same, of course. And I have been smothered the way you and your friends and colleagues have been smothered in America. I was visited by the FBI when Biden was still president. And had I broken any laws? No. But I had written for a platform in Russia, which today, of course, would probably throw me in jail in Britain. And under the Magnitsky Act, which was not even explicitly claimed to be an act of censorship, if you censor any press or media organization or any organization at all, and anyone who is involved or even plausibly accused of being involved with that organization can be subject to, prosecution, or worse than prosecution, administrative
detention.
Yes, exactly. Administrative detention in classic Kafka terms. And I was visited by two very polite FBI agents back in 2023-24. And I had not broken any law. They had not accused me of breaking any law. But they solemnly warned me that I had written for a platform based in Europe that had been sanctioned under the Magnitsky Act. And if I continued to write for them or received any more payment from them, the payments were very modest, about between $50 to $200 maximum for an article once every month or every 2 months or so. So it wasn't exactly, huge money and corruption. But they said you will be liable to jail for 5 years, and simultaneously for $100,000 fine. $100,000 fine. And this was under an act which had been passed for other reasons, supposedly to go after evil drug kings in Mexico. But you just turned, and of course, that's what you are describing here as well. So we already have this censorship in America, what is now being extended to Europe. Wow. And it's all too familiar. But the one point I want to add is we had a politician over here 100 years ago nearly. And the late Senator Huey Long, he was killed violently, and it wasn't a big bad conspiracy. His own bodyguards were so drunken and incompetent that they killed an innocent man thinking he was going to assassinate the senator, and they accidentally killed the senator too. It was the gang. That was what really happened. I discovered this story in itself years later, but it was the gang who couldn't shoot straight. But Long was a brilliant and unusual guy. He was a demagogue. He was the fascist dictator of Louisiana, but he wasn't anti-Jewish, and he certainly wasn't anti-Black, anti-African American. He gave Black Americans full parity in relief programs and jobs when no other Southern state governor would do so. And he opposed anti-Semitism. He was openly critical of Hitler, but he was also a foe of Franklin Roosevelt. And he was a brilliant guy, and he had the Southern wit to him. And what he was once asked before he himself died, could fascism ever take over America? Or we could say liberty-loving England and Britain, right? And his reply was simple: sure it can, only it'll be called anti-fascism. And this is what you are monitoring here, and this is what you have just confirmed. Now, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the two parties trying to oppose this, or claiming to oppose this, are Restore and Reform. But of course, Restore split from Reform. And they have two leaders who are both charismatic, used to work closely together, are now bitter foes. How do we disentangle this? Guide me and
I'll just sorry, but we've got three and a half minutes left. So if you could take us through to the break
Basil.
on that topic about Basil. So we've got
this can only be part one.
Labour Party. Is Reform and Restore a solution? And is that assassination or murder of a leading Reform politician, Anne Widdecombe, a steer and a warning to Nigel Farage? So 3 minutes left.
Yeah, well, it's a very murky business, the Anne Widdecombe murder / assassination. I mean, arrested a man who'd driven from the north of England in a rust bucket of a car, killed her, and then drove straight back again. But I mean, that story is starting to look like complete nonsense. Suddenly, there might be a political motive to it. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, we have to wait till a little bit further down the line. It was a really bizarre killing. I mean, are Restore and Reform the answer? Well, unfortunately, they're both parties have been hijacked by Zionists once again. So I know, Reform looks like it might be taken over by Robert Jenrick. He is the former Tory minister who's sort of manoeuvring himself to take over should Farage's publicity stunt by resigning and then fighting a by-election in Clacton in what's turning out to be a pantomime where his chief opponent is a guy with a dustbin on his head, and then he's got Lawrence Fox running for Reclaim to his right, apparently.
Another re-party, yeah.
Another re-party, yes, exactly.
Right.
So the problem with Inspector Lewis,
that there are libertarian tendencies in Reform and Restore. I agree, but they only go so far. I mean, Reform certainly want to ban all anti-genocide marches. So think of that. I mean, that's a recipe for serious civil unrest, because most of the population of Britain recognize what's happened in Gaza as a genocide and are opposed to it. I mean, I think the biggest march has had 1.5 million or 2 million people on the streets. Well, that's a complete non-starter. But now, of course, there's this Reform Friends of Israel. I mean, Jenrick has actually gone so far as to say he wants to see the Israeli flag at all points of entry to the UK.
Really?
So, what does that tell you? In the Restore Britain, in the Restore Britain lot are a little bit more nuanced, and they're populated by some of this sort of new generation of 20-something, 30-something white British intellectuals who are scratching their heads slightly about why it is that Israel is allowed to be an ethno-state, but no other country is. And in fact, that Zionists seem particularly opposed to Britain being an ethno-state. It's a double standard.
Basil, I've got to cut you off there. Fantastic show. Thank you so much. We're going to have you on again. I mean, we've given a tour d'horizon of enormous quality. So thank you so much, and have a great day, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Basil.